Okay? So what is the goal of CRM? And it's always interesting to kind of hear some of these responses because depending on who I ask, a lot of times it's general manager, sales manager, sometimes different people in the room, will get caught up on, hey, it's to print the buyer's order or it's to complete a phone call. They get so focused on some of these little functions of the technology that they lose sight of what they're really trying to accomplish, right? Which is, to basically create a superb customer experience that's going to differentiate them from the other 5 Ford dealerships that are in their same town that are selling the exact same product for the exact same prices and servicing the exact same cars. And so by creating that superb customer experience, that ultimately gets them to their ultimate goal, which is to sell and service more cars. And so, when I think about us as consultants, and I ask that question to you guys now, what is the goal for us as consultants as we're going out with our dealerships? High level, anybody? Retention, right? That's the ultimate goal that we're, obviously going in there and trying to achieve. And, in order to get retention, we have to basically add value. The product has to add value, we have to deliver a service. And so when you take a step back and you look at some of the big consulting companies, that are out there, they do a really good job when they go in and work with their clients at taking a step back and really understanding their business. And I think sometimes, when we go in, we take that approach that the dealership, sometimes takes when we're going in and expecting what the consulting services that we're going to be delivering are. And we get so focused on, training or a specific product or a specific feature. And I think sometimes we lose track of that big picture, which is ultimately to help them understand that the goal of what we're trying to accomplish is to create a customer experience that, again, it's going to differentiate them from everyone else in the industry. Competitors that sell the exact same makes and competitors that sell different makes. And so, I get into a big thing when I'm out there talking about one of our models. It used to be printed on our business cards. I don't think it's on there anymore, but we had a saying, kind of one of our founding principles was people, process, technology. And when I first started consulting, it took me a long time to really wrap my head around what that meant. And, the longer I progressed in my, progressed in my consulting, I thought about all the stores out there. And, you can think of all the stores in your own territories. And you have some that are really great, and you have some that just suck, right? They're bad dealers. No matter what you try, sometimes they don't do. And, I tried to thinking about people, process, technology, and the one thing that's consistent across all those dealerships, the good and the bad, is dealer socket, right? The technology doesn't change. And so it really helped me wrap my mind around, when I go in here, I obviously need to make sure that I'm identifying people and really analyzing these processes. And that's a couple years ago when I worked with Dallin Moon, and he came up with the idea of the Process Perfect Report to go in and really analyze each different segment of the business so we can identify how to actually achieve those goals that we're trying to with the dealership. And so, I put this definition up here that I pulled from the Business Dictionary online, just what it means, to kind of be a consultant. An experienced professional who provides expert knowledge. He or she works in an advisory capacity, and some consultants have brought dramatic shifts in management thinking and improvements in the performance of organizations. Okay? I like that second line a lot. Brought dramatic shift in management thinking and improvements of organizations. And so, I think a lot of times we go in and we have, one of the issues that we sometimes run into, right, is there's a lot of different vendors in our industry. So when we go into a dealership, there's times when I'm there and Auto Trader's there, the Auto's there. There's a lot of different employees that go out and work with our stores, right? And a lot of them work on an account rep level. So a lot of times, I think a lot of our dealers go in with these preconceived notions that, our responsibility is to go in and train and fix problems. And I think it's our job to obviously, earn that title that's on our business card of consultant and really try to take them to the next level. And so again, as we kind of talk through some specific things, I really want you guys to think of the approach that you're taking and make sure we're thinking big picture and really trying to solve that problem of creating a superb customer experience for them that's going to, again, add enough value that they're going to be customers for life. So, you guys have probably noticed that this company is very, very process driven. Okay? Process is key to being successful. As we grow, it helps with scalability, and there's a lot of reasons why we do it to stay consistent. And so one of the things that, I learned along the way is, don't check the boxes. Dealers can tell when you're going through the motions, right? We need to be genuine when we're out there, and it really makes a difference. So I kind of wanted to share a quick story of back when I was in Michigan. That was the first territory that I covered. The first dealership I lost. So there was this really small dealership, and when I first took over the territory, I kind of had identified them as one of the basically troubled dealerships in my region. I thought they were barely holding on. They could cancel at any time. So the owner, Tim Cole, he wasn't very engaged. He wasn't that involved. I'd call him all the time. He would never answer. I'd send him emails. He'd never answer. And so I went in there. I ended up developing a really good relationship with the GM. And over time, it took about 8 months. I finally got these stores back on track. And so, again, these guys were out in the middle of nowhere. It took a lot of work to get them there. I was getting up, 2 hours early, staying really long days, working 2 hours late. And kind of out of the blue, right when I felt like I was, really making progress with the dealership, I get an email from Tim. And I hadn't talked to Tim in about 4 months, okay? Because what I had done is I was getting so frustrated that he wasn't returning my calls and wasn't returning my emails that I started just reaching out to the GM, right? That's part of our process, right? Make a raving fan call to the GM. So I thought I looked good. I was checking the boxes. My manager, the reports my manager was running each month looked great, right? And so he calls me and basically, says he needs to get his prospect in. I was confused. I was like, Tim, we've been making such progress. Why did you cancel? And it's funny to kind of think back now. There was 2 features that we didn't have at the time that he really wanted. And this is only about 3.5 years ago. He wanted e-brochures, and he wanted the ability to stop the timer on a Webley from a cell phone. Okay, so 3 years ago we didn't have this. Kind of crazy to think back. But I was there literally a week before and had a good meeting with the general manager and told her that those features were coming literally in a week. And so Tim was frustrated when I told him this because he did not want to switch, but he felt those were core things to his business. And so, I was frustrated obviously too, and I told him, I said, Tim, I call you and I email you, you never call me back. And he says, well, I actually do read those emails. I noticed you haven't been reaching out to me, And again, you were frustrated. And I was just so let down because I thought back to all that work I had done for the previous 8 months where I was getting up early, where I was driving far, where I was staying long, where I was putting in the extra hours. And I missed one of the steps in the process because I was just checking boxes. And I knew in my, heart's heart that Tim was the right guy. He was the actual decision maker at the dealership. So I learned a tough lesson that day on don't check the boxes. So. And for those of you that are new consultants out here, not to get off topic, raving fan calls are extremely important. Where's Chase at? So Chase was telling me last night at dinner, one of the things we had a group recently canceled this last year was the Belize group, a big 17-store group up in Minneapolis, or where are they at? Where? Boston. And they ended up coming back on. It took about 4 or 5 months that they were off the product. And when we were going through the negotiations, one of the things that helped us get the deal back was the whole time he was making his CE3. He was doing his 3 rating fan calls and sending in his emails. And even though they weren't responding, they were getting those messages and helped us, stay in contact with the right people at the dealership. So my next topic is just kind of work smarter. Obviously, we want to, progress and be more efficient in our role. And kind of after I was working in Michigan, that's when I took on kind of new responsibilities where I went into full territory. And so I was managing a crazy amount of dealers. And so there, probably like many of you, you feel like there's more workload than what you have hours in the day. And so I really needed to identify ways where I could be more efficient and still, obtain that goal, which is retention. So one of the first things that I did was I think at the time I was working maybe like 40 dealerships or so, and I prioritized and identified those ones that I thought were most likely to cancel. And so at the beginning of the month, those were the ones that I would focus on. Whereas before, I get frustrated, and you probably feel that same way, that, hey, these guys never call me back, and they end up always getting pushed to the, later in the month because you feel energized and you want to talk to those dealerships who are willing to communicate back to you. So anyway, once I started prioritizing and working with those 5, and I would put in extra little TLC to turn them around, it would take 3 or 4 months, but eventually I'd get them to where they were a successful dealership and didn't have to cancel. So that was one of the things that really helped me prioritize and spend the most time with the dealerships that needed the most attention, and spend a little less time with those who I've put in the effort in the past and don't need to spend as much time with. And so one of the other things I learned when doing that, you guys probably notice our dealers are needy, right? They need a lot of attention. And so it's hard on a 4-hour site visit sometimes to get with all the departments and cover all the things that you want to. And so the one thing I want you to remember is don't be short-sighted on how much you have to work. Remember that you have not just that month or that week to work with them. You have a quarter and you have a year and you have a long time. And so when you're taking your approach when you're working with the dealership, don't bite off more than you can chew, because you're going to get overwhelmed, and we're going to not be able to deliver on the expectations that you set. So pick a few goals that are executable each time, and then come up with a game plan. When I started going and talking to my dealerships, and phrasing that way, saying, hey, here's what we want to work on today, here's some things I've identified, I also want your input on what we want to do. We can talk about that on the call next month, and the next month, and the next time I'm out in the quarter, we can, work on it more. So it really helped me, number one, just get customers on my conference call and really sell all that. Third thing, I always came up with a monthly focus. So obviously all of our dealerships are different, but in my preparation, I became really good at one specific topic that I hadn't consulted on before, that I felt like I could go out and add to all of my dealerships across the board. Sometimes it was a new feature, sometimes it was a new process, whatever it may be. And I think Ben, he's been doing a great job creating, a similar thing right now, the monthly focus. So are you guys using that out there?
Yes, yes.
That's awesome. And so, continue to use things like those tools that Ben creates, because those are things that you can roll out across the board, become really good at selling it and understanding that particular product, and roll it out to your dealers. And then finally, I was traveling a crazy ton. I was on the road, a lot of times I'd have to fly out on Sundays, because I was doing visits Monday through Friday and flying back to the different destinations that I'd have to go. And so the last thing I wanted to do was take the time, and, half hour, whatever it takes, to write one of those recap emails and post it in notes within 48 hours so I could, have that done. So eventually I realized, as I was writing all these emails, a lot of times I was regurgitating myself, right? There's only so many different ways you can explain email capture, or whatever the different product is that we're kind of talking on. And so I would create a Word doc that I keep like in a Dropbox folder, and every time I would consult on a particular idea or product or function, I would basically copy it and paste it over into this Word doc. And so eventually I had so much content in there that I could almost plug and play. Now, the cool thing was, I'd still have, certain things that I would customize for each dealership, but I had to spend a lot less time just retyping and saying the same thing over and over again. So that's just a little idea of something I did, but, I wanted to kind of get your juices flowing and just think of ways out there, as you're working with your dealerships, that you can work smarter and be more efficient and do more with less time. And then finally, connect the dots. Our dealerships are extremely visual learners. We go out all the time, and we talk to them, and we're experts in the field, and they don't listen, a lot of the time, and it doesn't really resonate with them. And so a couple weeks ago, I was on a visit with Adam Maher, and we were up in Michigan working with the Randy Wise group. It's a fairly new group that we worked with. And it was a service meeting, so we had all 6 service managers in the room and like one of their corporate trainers, and to our surprise, Randy Wise actually showed up, and he hadn't been very involved really with anything on the sales side or anything so far. And he was real quiet, just sat in the back of the room, and we're going through our presentation. And one of the things we did the night before as part of our preparation was we created a marketing document that we wanted to try to send out while we were in the meeting in order to really help them understand the value that we create dealers, through our marketing tools. And so when we sent that out during the meeting, we did the whole list builder thing where we went through a real specific scenario where we pulled up, Honda Accords with 60,000 miles and hadn't been in for a timing belt service. So we got real specific and did the whole thing. There was 800 customers, and I think we then showed them how many email addresses there were. It was only like 200 out of the 800, of course. And so, they're just sitting here, eyes kind of glazed over. It's not really, connecting with them. And so once we actually sent the blast, we pulled up the email tracking report. Within a couple seconds, typically refresh that, and there's always like 5 or 6 people who, who've opened it there at the beginning. And so literally everyone in the room, like their eyes lit up, and that was the thing that finally connected everything that we'd been talking about for the previous 20 minutes about email capture, about the marketing tools and everything. No one really got excited until they saw that. And that was the one thing that we finally did in order to connect the dots. But, the Randy Wise, who literally hadn't said a word all meeting, was kind of sitting back there. He got so fired up, he pretty much took over the meeting, and, the things that we had talked about, the first 30 minutes, he was passionate about. And it really helped create a spark for us, and, now we're doing a lot of really cool things service-wise, where if we wouldn't have connected the dots, we would have left that meeting, and I don't think they would have been engaged in service, and it was one of those things that eventually they would probably cancel within the next few months. So how can we make the department stronger? So, one of the challenges that we've had, since I've been here is managing our growth, right? You saw the stats yesterday in the meeting, how many consultants that we have since when we started, and it seems to almost double or, every single year. And so one of the things I feel like we can do a much better job is mentoring consultants. So Ken's going to talk about this here in a second, so I'm not actually going to get into it too much, but that's one of the things I think we can all make a personal challenge is, even if you've been here 6 months, go out and start, we have new hires, I mean, we have Mike Tate that we started right now, and there's a lot of things that you guys have learned, even the ones that are new, that you can, impart onto him. So create a network. So when I was kind of coming up through the consulting ranks, this was one of the things that really helped me. And I'm definitely not, close to being the smartest guy in the room, but there are so many smart people. And when I started, I think Mark Gosser started like a month before me. I had guys like Dallin Moon and Nathan Divany in the back there. We all kind of started around the same time. And so we were going through a lot of us, had the same questions, and we started going into territory at the same time, had a lot of those same things. And so, back in the day, Dallin Moon, he is a smart guy. You just saw he created that strategic review. He and I would talk like an hour on the phone almost every week. Sometimes it was about personal things, sometimes it was about work, but we were challenging each other. And I kind of went out and created, my own network that I still use to this day all the time when I have questions and issues that come up. Obviously you have your manager and your directors and things like that you can go to, but this room can really, we need to leverage all the collective knowledge that we have. Okay, so if you haven't already done that, everyone's here today. So really work on creating these networks and then utilize them in the future, because together there isn't a problem out there that we can't collectively solve. And then finally, celebrate the wins. We talk about this almost every single retreat, right? It's a grind sometimes out there dealing with dealers. There's some that are resistant to our product, and sometimes they're rude. And it's tough, right? We're out there on our own island sometimes, right? We don't get to have everybody here at once and get to see everything that's going on with the company and get energized. And so sometimes it can be little things, sometimes it can be big things, but make sure that you hold on to the wins. And when you have a bad day, let it through and work and try to get past it. When I'm having a bad day or I'm working with a tough customer, one of the things I think back to is one of the toughest groups I think I've ever worked with this company. When I first started, it was the Antwerpen group. So I don't know if any of you guys have worked with them. They're out there in Maryland? Baltimore area. And it was one of my first installs. So they started 5 years ago. The worst group. Their Toyota store, I think one day when Nathan and I ran the strategic review, there was 0 fresh ups. This is like a high volume Toyota store. This whole group was not using anything. And so when I took over as manager originally, we had identified them, and I was just scared. I was like, this group could go anytime. I was trying to do everything, and we had Nathan doing everything, working. Nathan at one point was calling the main contact that we were trying to get a hold of. His name is Brian Dolan. He's the COO of the group. We would email him. We would call him. No matter what we do, we could not get a meeting with this guy. And the owner was Jack Antwerpen, and he was even harder to get a hold of. And so I literally had no idea why they'd been paying. I was seriously why are these guys paying for the tool? And so Nathan took over as manager, and Kyle Howard ended up going and starting to work with them. And somehow, after a few months, he developed the relationships where we finally got our foot in the door with this group. And we had a GM meeting, and with Brian Dolan, they all showed up. We were getting thrown under the bus. Jack Antwerpen even showed up for this meeting, and he was pretty much pissed and livid because we're going through the process perfect, and he's seeing zeros across the board for all of his dealers as far as internet response times 2 hours, fresh up counts are 0, nothing's being utilized. And I think he even looked at us and was like, why am I paying for this tool? And was pretty pissed. I was like, hey, I've been wondering the same thing for the last 5 years. So I didn't have an answer for him. And eventually we got through the meeting. We were getting thrown under the bus left and right, but we came up with a game plan and we executed. And so even though it's not really my win, Kyle did a great job with that group. I think about that sometimes when I'm having, a tough day or working with a rough customer. I remember that, there's always a solution. If we keep trying to work together, we can get there. So, round of applause for Kyle. So, we talked through a couple of different kind of ideas here as far as how we can be better consultants. Why do you guys think we're losing stores? Why do we lose customers? Any guesses? Lack of communication? Mark?
They can do a lot of things with just about any CRM, and I don't think that a lot of people see the value in us as a consultant. If they did, they would never do.
Hey, I think that's perfect. Anybody else? You know, the direct, go ahead.
It's just a lot of managers that don't really figure out at all, their just don't want it all.
Yep. You know, at the end of the day, there's, a lot of different reasons and excuses that dealers will give you. You know, sometimes the product might, not work the way that they want to, or support's not as good. Or typically when we take these calls, me and the other managers, I don't think I've really ever heard, hey, I'm canceling because my consultant sucks, or didn't do this, or didn't do that, right? They usually have some other excuse. And so, what keeps me up at night is I'm always trying to think in my territory how, we can hit our goal, which is retention, right? How can we keep every single customer on the product? And I think, right now I think I have, 4 consultants in my region that are managing over 50 stores, like 55. So Mark, Kyle, Travis, Cass, right? And these guys are great consultants, and they're adding a ton of value. And so I think, at kind of a big picture, that these dealerships aren't saying, that they're canceling over consulting, but a lot of times, the value that we're adding, kind of like what Mark just said, ends up keeping these types of dealerships on the product. And so, again, when we're thinking about how we can be a better consultant, everyone in this room can create that value. And so we just need to look at our approach and make sure we're looking at every single angle and using our collective knowledge to try to figure out what that approach is that's going to deliver that value, that's going to keep these customers for life. Because eventually, these guys, when they switch, I don't think I've ever, there's only been a few cases where they cancel dealer socket and they go to nothing. They're always going somewhere. And so we do have the best people in the industry. We have the best product. And so, we just need this department to go out and help educate why we're the best and sell that value. So, one of the things I've done, especially in the last few years, to help progress is set goals. Obviously in life you're always wanting to progress. Cameron and Jonathan talked about yesterday, as a company and as a professional, you don't want to get complacent. And so you should always be setting goals. And so I read this. Who in here is a Seinfeld fan? I'm a big Seinfeld fan. So I read this, I think back in like 2007, and I didn't start implementing it until recently, but there was a comedian who was on tour with Jerry and had the opportunity to talk to him before his set went on. He asked him, what are the keys to being a successful comedian? And so Jerry said, the key to being a successful comedian is to create better jokes. In order to create better jokes, you have to create better material. And to do that, you have to write material every single day. And so Jerry said what he did was he went out and bought a big wall calendar, put it up in a prominent place in his house, and he would set that goal every day to write a new joke. And every day he did that, he'd take a big red marker, it's kind of hard to sit here, and mark a big X. And eventually, after a few days, you'll get so ingrained and so fixated on wanting to keep that streak going that you'll do that habit every single day. And so, it's hard sometimes. We're traveling a lot, we're on implementation, we have a site visit, we have multiple conference calls a day. Sometimes when I get home at night, I just want to turn my brain off and turn on the TV and not do anything. And so, one of the things I've implemented probably in the last 2 years was I would create a goal. Okay? One of them will be a personal goal, some of them will be a professional goal. And little things, right? Like I have a thing right now just with working out and hitting a certain thing on my Nike Fuel Band every day. On the professional side, I'm always trying to become a little bit better manager every single day. And so, I love reading. I read a lot of fiction books, but I don't traditionally read a lot of professional development books. And so I made the goal this quarter that I'm going to read 2 chapters every day out of a book that's going to help me be a better manager. And so I challenge you guys to go out. Hopefully you already are, but if you're not, set goals. They don't have to be big. They can be little, small little things, but execute on them and create the habits, that'll go out and make, you a stronger person in your families, in the company, in life. And Brent Thurgood, where are you at? So Brent, I actually told him about this a couple months ago, and he's implemented it, and I think it's been pretty successful for him. What's that? Okay, yeah, we talked about why. He doesn't want to tell us what his goals are, but it's helped him execute on them. So kind of in closing, you guys have the ability, we have the collective knowledge, and we want to make sure that we are trying to take an approach that's high level to help those dealerships really truly understand what our company and what our product can do for them. Okay? And so when you're thinking out there, make sure that you're trying to do everything possible to be a consultant. you know, and steer away from that just industry thing where they all think that we're account reps, right? That we're going in there just to train and do that stuff. And if we go out and we be consultants, we are going to retain 100% of our clients, okay? So that's all I had. Any questions? Thank you.